it today. Pete Nakos, on3.com, is the sports business reporter for the website. And Jeremy Crabtree, who's a great friend of the show, also mentioned Pete to me, and he and I traded a couple of text and direct messages, and glad to have him on the show today. Pete, thank you very much. What is, in your opinion, of all the various transfer portal recruitments, is there one story that might be one of your favorites?
Oh, man, there's a lot. Well, first off, thanks for having me on, guys. And, it's there's a lot of, like, little recruiting stories and tidbits being shared all across the country right now. I will say, though, that the one thing that has really stuck out to me, so JT Daniels officially entered the portal today from West Virginia, and his transfer portal recruitment was a little different than everyone else's. He went in this past spring, and he whittled it down to a few schools. And as it's kind of become known now, his family asked for a 4-bedroom house when he visited Oregon State, which would include a personal chef. He ultimately did not go to Oregon State, and he went to West Virginia, where he's now leaving, and get a mid-six-figure deal from them. Just crazy. It's completely crazy and unprecedented in college football. But that little nugget right there, I mean, it doesn't really get any crazier than that.
Pete, have you are we going to see eventually a market correction in this? Have you seen the NIL market flow to, for example, a guy like Devin Leary in the portal can probably name his price a lot of different places because he's got skins on the wall, as opposed to a guy like JT Daniels, who, even though he'd been in college for a while, all of his potential was still very theoretical.
Right. I would say that we are headed towards that, and I think that this portal cycle we will see some sort of a market correction, mostly because when we have these conversations about athletes being paid, well, the athletes are receiving these endorsement deals and compensation from NIL collectives who have had the last year to try to figure out what a athlete's value means to the collective and to the football team that they will be joining. So yes, I think we'll see that. And like you said, proven starters in the portal are going to mean so much more than what a high school recruit means to a program, and even some of these kids hitting the portal who really just don't have the film or the stats to back it up.
Pete, what are we talking about now for a high-level quarterback prospect? Where do you think is sort of the starting line? Is it 7 figures out of the chute for a guy who could be a difference maker at QB? Or does that go across – I mean, I know other positions get paid highly as well, but, let's, I guess, start with quarterback. Is that – where's the baseline at this point in time for big-time guys?
Yeah, so let's start with quarterback. So if you are a top 10 quarterback prospect in your recruiting class, you are going to be able to command probably a 7-figure annual salary through the collective, which school you end up landing at. And that looks different at each institution and each collective. But let's be clear, it's not performance-based. And there is activations in these agreements. So the athlete would have to post on social media about the collective or maybe sign an autograph or a personal appearance. But throwing 25 touchdowns that has nothing to do with the cash that these athletes are earning.
So what if a player, and you just mentioned in a way, they underperform, they don't reach that maybe $1 million baby type NIL? You say that can someone back out of an NIL? Can the business back out of an NIL?
That's quite the question. So could they opt out of a deal? Theoretically, yes, but then you would technically open yourselves up to a breach of contract situation. The one thing that we are going to start to see and eventually maybe even report on when it happens is an athlete transferring from a school they came to an agreement with a collective on, and they're just going to have to break the contract, and the collective is just going to have to eat the money they paid, because they're not going to want to announce to the world that, hey, we paid this kid $1.5 million over 2 years and we screwed up. Oh yeah, the NCAA is now going to have a hard evidence that we violated the policy. So yeah, it's going to get really interesting, and we are going to have some of these situations, but how they all kind of come about is just going to be fascinating to watch.
Yeah, and I guess, Pete, the interesting thing will be the schools that have the money to, ride it all. The collectives are like, well, it didn't work out with that guy. He was a bust, but money doesn't matter to us because we've got deep pockets. And the schools that then have to, or the collectives that didn't have to go, well, now we can't do that for another 3 or 4 years because we whiffed hard.
Right. That's a huge conversation going on right now, and trying to figure out like the hit rate for. I mean, if you bring in like a 25 player class, and I mean this is all theoretical right now, but like let's say you're paying, I don't know, $20 million over 3 years for a 25 person class, give or take. I mean, what's the hit rate going to be? How much like money did you literally just burn by paying for that recruiting class? So that's a real conversation people are having. But on the flip side of that, you can make the argument like, okay, if I only pay for the 5-star quarterback, I'm probably my chances are high of getting a pretty good quarterback. And oh yeah, he is going to be one of the biggest name recruits in this recruiting cycle. So a lot of kids are going to want to come play with him, and it's really going to energize the fan base. So there are some can make the argument it's worth the money.
Pete, is there a program or two or however many you want to name that you feel like are really on the forefront and the cutting edge of this whole thing that you kind of look at and you go like, man, they've got this sort of figured out, or they've got a great game plan?
Without making it sound like I know that they are doing recruiting inducements or anything like that, I think it's really fair to say that a Tennessee, a Miami, a USC, and a few others have really set themselves up for success because of the amount of money they have raised and because of the infrastructure and alignment they have put in place to really succeed in this new era.
Do you think we're ever going to see a story where someone signs an NIL, for whatever reason it doesn't go well, and they turn in the school?
It's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. Do I think that will happen? As of right now, if you had to ask me, no, because the NCAA hasn't done anything. But if the NCAA does something, I could see a lot of athletes maybe even like calling up brands and things like that.
Pete Nakos with us on 365 Sports business reporter for On3.com.
Pete, how hard is it to generate? I know that On3 does the value, like the NIL value on their site as well. How hard is it to kind of generate that, like figuring out how much it's going to take to make this person happy? Because it's not like, they're walking around going, it's going to take $3 million, like just out there in the public, like
right.
you are in the NFL.
Right. So the On3 NIL valuation is like an algorithm based, and it tries to like project the annual value for an athlete in the NIL market. It doesn't try to like project the number of cash that they're supposed to bring in off brand deals. But that's a huge challenge collectives are facing right now. It's like, so how much is this athlete worth to me? And then at the same time, like kids are trying to figure out like how much they are actually worth, and if they're being underballed or highballed. And I'm sure that all the kids maybe being offered a little more cash than they're worth don't have a problem with that. But it's a real issue both collectives and athletes are facing right now.
So, somebody asked about this I know that, for example, Polian at Baylor has almost become, I don't know what the exact title is, but you almost have a general manager, so to speak, with various college programs. Isn't that yet
right.
another position that every school's had to pretty much manage or add to what they already have?
Yeah, I mean, it looks different at every school right now. At some schools, it's the head of the collective. At others, there's actually an NIL director that's paid through the athletic department. And then and inside the football program, there's someone who runs the NIL operations. But yes, it has become a full-blown it's like a mix between like a marketing agency and a professional sports team. the most unique and unprecedented thing I think we've ever seen in sports.
I saw this story, and I believe it might have been on your feed. I'm not sure. But inside Arizona State booster Nap Lawrence's $1 million pledge to NIL. So Kenny Dillingham had his introductory press conference, and all of a sudden, here comes the money, right?
Yep. My coworker Andy Witcher wrote that, and he did a nice little dive into that. You're going to see at a lot of these introductory press conferences, coaches, I mean, no longer is it going to be like, oh, my school has the best facilities, we can recruit here. It's going to be like, no, like, hey, you donors, like, how about you go donate 7 figures so we can go win on the recruiting trail and the transfer portal and player retention. And head coaches are going to want to go to schools that have alignment on NIL and have a collective that is ready to attack and dominate in this new world of college athletics.
Pete, will you have to start pulling tax returns on some of these people and freedom of information on to see how much they are getting on this first tax cycle?
We are headed in that direction. Yes, I think we are.
Oh boy! Did this? When we saw this coming, Pete, it happened so fast, and you mentioned there might be market correction, whether it's the transfer portal or NIL. I saw the note of Open Doors got $20 million of new funding. Your column was like the transfer portal and NIL on a collision course. I'm expecting total chaos. What does the Open Doors funding mean?
So the Open Doors funding just basically means so Open Doors is the largest NIL marketplace in the country next to Influencer. And Influencer provides technology to schools. They're each achieving the same goals in different ways. But Open Doors, the $20 million round of funding, it really just shows that investors, and even during this interesting time on Wall Street and across the country, that investors really believe that NIL is one of the fastest growing markets in the country. So the $20 million funding will go towards Open Doors expanding its business and things of that nature. But it really signals to the rest of the NIL industry that, hey, people on the outside are seeing what's going on and they believe in it, and it's going to turn into a $1 billion market.
It is crazy. I still think, though, the high school recruiting, right, Pete, is still the foundation of what is the core of maintaining a great program. The transfer portal can just be like the cherry and whipped cream on top.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, and maybe this is a conversation that you guys maybe even be best for, but the point of a college football program, right? Like, you might go get like 2 to 4 pieces out of the portal that bring you from good to great, but you're not going to get from bad to good ever by not doing well in high school football recruiting, right? Like, you can go get that like quarterback who could maybe lead you to a national championship, but you're not going to be able to get an offensive line that can win you a national championship out of the portal. At least I don't believe so. So winning in high school football recruiting, I think you will continue to see those programs consistently be in the college football playoff.
Last question from somebody on the chat room from Daniel. Baylor was kind of not behind the curve, but they just didn't do a lot of announcing of what they were doing, and then they started to kind of put some of that out there. In fact, there's a big event coming up on Saturday in Waco with Startup Waco. Is there somebody in particular that you know, a program or maybe even a couple of names that are just way behind the rest of the country?
So I guess a two-pronged answer there. I think Startup Waco's done a very nice job of quietly putting together a very strong program specifically for Baylor football. And then on the flip side of that, I think we've seen Vanderbilt launched its first NIL collective in the last 3 weeks. Same thing with Kentucky in the last month. Those two SEC programs are very behind. Each have very different alumni networks. Be very interested to see where Kentucky and Vanderbilt are on the football field in the next 5 years.
Pete, what got you into this? What was it that got you into this specific job as reporting on? I love it. There's people that do it, various sites, whatever, podcasts. But what got you into this?
Oh man, it kind of encapsulates everything I love, right? So I love college sports, and I could talk football and basketball all day, but for me, it's always kind of been like I like the extra layer. I like to build sources and build relationships, and I mean that's NIL, right? NIL at the end of the day, and it's always fun to talk about the recruiting violations and things of that sort and inducements, but NIL at the end of the day, right? That is an athlete building their brand and trying to market themselves to local businesses and national brands. In the ever evolving landscape we're in right now, right? It is there's something new to learn for me every day, which I love, and I mean, it has kind of really taken off in the last 7 months. Didn't really think I would be here, but it's been a blast.
It has been, and you're doing a great job covering it. We appreciate you jumping on with us today with the knowledge. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Have a good one, guys.
You too. On3.com, which is a site. Ivan Maisel, among others, are on it. Jeremy Crabtree recruiting. We'll get him on between now and National Signing Day in a couple of weeks. And he had a pretty bad head cold, and he reached out and said, hey, get Pete. It's at Pete_Nakos, Nakos 96. That's his Twitter feed, and it is one that you should enjoy and get on when you can. Anything from that